Greetings, everyone. Well, it is update time again here on the Multimedia Chronicles on Comic Book Wednesday. Yeah, got kind of a special one here for you. Diving into independent comic book land and a movie based on said independent comic. By the way, don't mind the fan sound over there. We're kind of getting into the heat of the summer here, and it's kind of muggy and miserable, so I'm just going to leave the fan on while I'm doing these, otherwise I just get too overheated and can't manage. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I do enjoy a good coming-of-age story, and I remember Annetta and I saw this one many, many moons ago, and I really, really enjoyed it and always wanted to pick it up for the collection. And then Criterion put out a really nice edition, which happened to be on sale recently, so I snapped it up. And of course, talking about the classic coming-of-age tale from director Terry Zwigoff, based on the comic book by Daniel Clowes, Ghost World from 2001. Yes. Now, of course, knowing that Ghost World was based on a comic book, I also wanted to get the comic book. So that's what I did. I got both of them. Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. I guess it's kind of a update slash mini review. It's not going to be like a super detailed, in-depth review or critical analysis or anything like that. But I thought I'd give you a few of my thoughts on the film and the comic and kind of some of the similarities and differences between them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Ghost World on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So Ghost World began its life as a kind of episodic comic book series written and drawn by Daniel Clowes, and it basically tells the story of Enid and her best friend Rebecca, that's her there, two young women, basically I think they're both 18, so, you know, young adults basically kind of leaving their teenage years and childhood behind and entering into young adulthood, and how it affects their friendship and sort of some of their observations of the adults in their world and things like that. So a lot of sort of social commentary. They're both kind of cynical, so they have kind of a cynical view. They do a lot of people watching and things like that. Now, most of you watching have probably at least seen the movie. I know it made a lot of waves when it originally came out. It was very critically acclaimed, and rightly so. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. We have Thora Birch starring as the lead character Enid. We have Scarlett Johansson fairly early in her career as her best friend Rebecca. And then, of course, the always wonderful Steve Buscemi as Seymour, the lonely middle-aged man that they initially start off pranking, but then Enid becomes very good friends with him. Now, one of the things I was always curious about was how closely the movie followed the comic. So I basically picked up both of these at the same time, literally the same Amazon order. And as soon as the comic came in, I couldn't wait to read it because I'd been wanting to read the original source material for quite some time. So I sat down and I just devoured the whole thing in one sitting. It was great. It's a pretty light, pretty fast read. And as I say, it is very episodic. It originally was published as part of an independent comic book series. I forget who the publisher was, but the series was called 8 Ball. And it was basically an anthology series of, you know, comic strips by various independent writers and artists. Almost like an underground comic kind of thing. In fact, in the Criterion edition, we have a reprint edition of one issue of 8 Ball. And it kind of gives you a taste of what the comic was like. Now, this particular one, it's not like a full reprint of like a full issue, but it just includes some of the Ghost World segments. So it has, I think, one of the original segments from the graphic novel, and it also has an additional 2-page sort of Where Are They Now thing, where we kind of get some idea of what Enid and Rebecca's life was like after the story of Ghost World. So in the movie, of course, it figures pretty heavily on the relationship between Enid and Seymour, how they become very good friends, very close friends, and very briefly become lovers, but realize that that's really not a thing that worked for them so much. But they have a very good, very sweet friendship. And Enid sees a lot of, Seymour has a lot of similar views about the world, and that's one of the ways in which they connect. So how they originally meet is as part of a kind of prank, sort of, as I mentioned, Enid and Rebecca do a lot of people watching, and they sort of form their own little stories about the people they see and what they think their lives are, and they slightly mocking, slightly nihilistic viewpoints. So at one point they find a personals ad from a man who is kind of reminiscent of, how Craigslist has the missed connections thing. It's like, oh, I saw you buying potatoes and I was too nervous to say hi, so coffee sometime? Something like that. And so they see a personals ad kind of like that, and there's just something about it that strikes a chord with Enid, and she suggests, well, why don't we pretend to be the woman that he's looking for, and then we'll just kind of sit and watch and see what happens, and we'll laugh at him. Like it's kind of a very mean-spirited prank, really. So anyway, so they arrange to, they answer the personals ad pretending to be the woman, and it's Seymour. He shows up for the date, and Enid and Rebecca and some of her friends are sitting in a booth nearby at this diner where they arrange to meet, to just kind of observe this guy and see what happens. And in the sort of reality of it, they feel really bad for him and realize that it was kind of a shitty prank. And, so he shows up, and of course the girl never shows up because she doesn't really exist, at least not in the way that he was hoping. And then he leaves. But then Enid becomes really curious about him and just kind of, follows him around and starts to learn more about him. And it turns out he's a really big fan of jazz music, like old 78 records of jazz music from like the 20s and 30s and whatnot. And has a big collection about them, is very knowledgeable about the genre and so forth. Now I should mention, as an aside, Terry Zwigoff himself is a huge jazz fan, and speaking of underground comics, is also very good personal friends with Robert Crumb. In fact, you may have seen this documentary a number of years ago about Robert Crumb that Terry Zwigoff did, and in that, in addition to finding out about Crumb's life and his career and his family, we also find out that he was a huge jazz musician fan. So there's definitely some drawing upon that in the fleshing out of the character of Seymour. Now I should mention, in the original graphic novel, Seymour isn't even really much of a character. It basically goes as far as they do the personal ads prank, and then we never see the guy again. That's just it. It's just another episode in their lives, and the rest of the story goes off in other directions. It's more centrally focused on their friendship and how they're both kind of going in different directions with their lives. But with the movie, it focused a lot more heavily. They felt there was more of a story to tell there with that, and explored it, and we have this wonderful, sweet friendship that develops out of it. I can definitely say that I relate a little bit to the character of Seymour. He's just sort of this lonely, middle-aged guy who's found solace in his interests and his collection. So kind of funny when you find things like that resonate with you in unexpected ways. So for me, his story was both familiar and sweet, but also kind of sad in that I saw a lot of my own life in that. Take from that what you will, but it is what it is. So Daniel Clowes himself was actually quite heavily involved with the production of the movie. He co-wrote the screenplay with Terry Zwigoff, and the two of them together kind of found this new story to be told within the framework of the existing story of the two girls. So much of the original graphic novel is in the movie, in terms of a lot of the little events and the people watching and such that they do, but the overall story in the movie is more of a coherent, continuous story, whereas the graphic novel is more just kind of little episodes of their lives and different people that they've met and different personal conflicts they have, and so forth. I think the two complement each other very nicely, and the movie very much captures the essence of those characters pretty much spot on. Like, I mean, you read the comic, you can't help but see and hear the characters from the movie in it, and vice versa. You know, the two work together very well. So I would say if you like one, you're gonna like the other as well, because they're different but the same, if that makes sense. But yeah, so it was great for me to be able to revisit the film because I hadn't seen it in so long. But then also to go back and actually finally get to check out the source material and see some of as I say, the similarities and differences. So definitely recommended. Love them very much. So if we just take a quick peek here, the original comic is, of course, black and white, and it has this wonderful, independent comic vibe to it. And the whole thing was written and drawn by Daniel Clowes himself. And I like how it has this it's black and white with like a single primary color. In this case, kind of like a turquoisey green. And I think is it the same? Yeah, it's the same colors throughout. So, yeah, there we go. Oh, I should mention also, a lot of people wonder why is it called Ghost World. I mean, it's nothing to do with ghosts or anything like that. Well, I mean, there's a lot of speculation about that, certainly. In particular, the sort of popular theory, I think, is just kind of how Enid sees the adults of the world around her and kind of is afraid of becoming like them and sees them as kind of ghosts just wandering through the world, like shells of people. Like, what happened to these people to make them like this, that they just seem so directionless and lost? And that's a big impetus for her, the forming of her friendship with Seymour. So here's somebody that she kind of observed from afar, but then actually took the time to get to know and realized, like, no, this is a real person with, like, real hopes and dreams and, likes and dislikes and disillusionments and what have you that, wasn't so dissimilar from her own. It's just he's been around a few more decades, So we find, like, as different as we think we all are, sometimes we're not that different, So, but really, where Ghost World came from, as much as you want to layer symbolism and subtext into it, where it actually came from, apparently, was even simpler than that. Was Daniel Clowes was just walking around one day and saw some graffiti on a wall that just said Ghost World. No context, no understanding what that graffiti artist was trying to say, or if they were trying to say anything, or what it meant. But there was just something about it that resonated with him, and that kind of became where the beginnings of the story came from. So, there you go. Sometimes it's not such a complicated explanation after all. But, yeah, so anyway, this is great. There's a few different editions of it. I wanted this one specifically because that's the one I remember seeing around when Annetta and I first saw the movie. So I grabbed this edition. And then we, of course, have this lovely Criterion edition loaded with extras, as you would expect. We have the aforementioned issue of 8 Ball, which does have a reprint of one of the episodes of the Ghost World comic. So this is, of course, a compilation of all of them. And then in the back we have Where Are They Now, which is basically just a little 2-page, very dense 2-page story that kind of gives you a few possibilities for how their lives went after the fact. And it's kind of left ambiguous in a way. It's up to you to decide if any of them are true or if none of them are true. But quite nice indeed. And I love this. First off, we have the director's signature. I love how the disc is made to look like the label on an old 78 record, which is quite nice. Nice touch there. And then, of course, we have the booklet, which is wonderful. Now, one of the reasons, here we go. We have Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson literally look like the characters from the movie just brought to life, or from the graphic novel just brought to life. It's wonderful. And even the supposed Satanist couple look very much like the couple in the comics. So it's great. Like, there was just such a wonderful working relationship, I think, that Terry Zwigoff and Daniel Clowes formed with this, and they just seem to be so much on the same page, and just hit this sort of creative explosion. So here, and Daniel Clowes also did some new artwork for the movie. He also did the cover actually for the Criterion edition. So again, still very involved with his project. You gotta love that. I mean, Terry Zwigoff to me is just such an interesting director. There he is with Scarlett Johansson there. I've loved all of his films that I've seen, and I always look forward to seeing what he's got coming next. And here we have, basically an artistic rendition of the making of the movie by Daniel Clowes. That's pretty cool. And it's a wonderful, wonderful booklet. Let me just see here. Yeah, here we are. Speaking of the Robert Crumb connection, these are pieces of art here from Enid's journal in the film are actually drawn by Sophie Crumb, who is Robert Crumb's daughter. So, like I said, he and Terry Zwigoff are very good friends, and have collaborated on things a number of times in the past. And let's see here. There's another one. Yeah, here we are. And even Robert Crumb. This is a Robert Crumb drawing here of Skip James, a famous jazz musician from the 20s, I believe. And 1931. That's what it was. Did Devil Got My Woman? There you go. So it's pretty cool. I like it a lot. And there we go. And there's the graffiti on the wall. Ghost World. They're walking by. I'm not sure if that actually appears in the film. Maybe it does. I can't remember. It's been a few months since I watched it. I'm kind of getting the urge to watch it again because it's just such a wonderful, wonderful film. And I love these characters and just kind of their not unrealistic view of the world. Now, in terms of extras, it's a new 4K digital transfer supervised by Terry Zwigoff. You have, audio commentary featuring Terry Zwigoff, Daniel Clowes, and producer Leanne Halfin. You got new interviews with Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson, and Elena Douglas. You got an extended excerpt from Gumnam from 1965, which was the Bollywood film that forms the basis of the opening titles. So you actually get to see that full clip in all its glory, and that's been fully restored as well, apparently. You got some deleted scenes, the trailer. You got an essay by critic Howard Hampton, plus a 2001 piece by Terry Zwigoff on the film's soundtrack. There's a lot of classic jazz pieces in the soundtrack, and reprinted excerpts, of course, from the comic. And there you go. So it's a very nice edition of a wonderful film that I will always love, and I definitely recommend checking out the comic as well. As always, if you'd like to add either of these to your collection, I will include Amazon links in the description down below. Big thanks to those of you who use my Amazon links, because that does help to support the show and allow me to get more stuff to do videos about. So, very cool. So that's it for this week. Next week for Comic Book Wednesday, I have something that's kind of related to this. Something I bought around the same time, completely by coincidence, having this sort of Robert Crumb connection. Because, of course, as I mentioned, Terry Zwigoff did the Robert Crumb movie, right? So around the same time, I rewatched the movie, which I hadn't seen in a very long time. Great documentary, by the way. And it kind of put me in the mood for some other Robert Crumb stuff. So I picked up a few things, which we're going to talk about next week. I don't know if I'll give you a little... Nope. You'll have to tune in next week to find out what that is and what other things I got that tie into it, but that's just a little tease for you. All right, so that'll be next Comic Book Wednesday. Until then, check out Ghost World. You won't be disappointed. It's a great film, wonderful cast, great soundtrack, and a really good comic, too. Alrighty, that is it for me to you, folks. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time in whatever form that is. I got lots of videos coming out. Hope you'll all enjoy them. And, so big thanks to you for watching. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. Be sure to catch me on Twitch. I stream just about every day. If you like what you see and you'd like to throw a couple bucks towards the show to help out, don't forget to hit the thanks button down below where you can do so. And I'll see you next time. Until then, sayonara.